The second best lesson that I ever got was from the job. So I had, a couple jobs here and there, but when I got older and I got my real corporate job, um, I had a guy there. And let me set this story for you. He was, if you old heads out there remember Happy Days, okay? Um, there was a guy on there called Arthur Fonzarelli. They called him the Fonz. Wore black leather jacket, feathered back hair, white guy. Well, this guy looked just like the Fonz, except he had salt and pepper hair. But he had the slender face, the same hairstyle, and he was my director. Okay, and just to give you a setting on how that worked, is like in the company you probably have like customer service and some levels in there. Some people go into the IT department and have the help desk, and there's levels in there, and then the help desk passed the call to the next level of support and the next level of support. Well, he was the director, so he was way up here. Okay. And so when I came in and I'm sitting on the floor and I'm doing my work, and this was within the first week that I was there. He came up to me and he said, "JB," and he talked real cool. Okay, you got to understand this guy. He had $200 white shirts that was always pressed with this collar, black pants. He always drove like a sporty Cadillac. Every 2 years, get a new Cadillac. And he comes up to me and he said, "Hey, JB," he said, "Are you invested in 401k?" So now me, coming from where I'm coming from, we weren't too trusting. And so, but I could just tell this guy was nice. He was a good guy. But, I got my, I'm on alert because I'm like, what is he talking about? Is he talking about some kind of, new software that they're going to, put into place to put us out of a job? Is he talking about, and I'm thinking, oh, did I put something on my application or my resume that made him think that I know something called 401k? Never heard the term 401k. You get where I'm going? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I've never heard the term 401k, what is this guy talking about? So what he did was he could tell that I didn't know, and I'm like looking at him like, I don't think I know what you're talking about. He said, "Come to my office after 5 o'clock today, 15 minutes, and you can be on your way. But I got, tell you something." And I'm like, all right, I've only been there, this just days, right? I go to his office. I said, "Hey, Ed, you told me to come by your office." So he sits down, he had a couple pieces of paper out, and he was like, "John, 401k is an investment tool." He said, you have to invest in this." So now I'm like, all right, they trying to get money out of me. And he just had a few words written on a piece of paper that he gave me. And he said, "The way this works is," at the time, I think the company was matching like 4%. And then a year or so later, it went to 6%. But let's just take the 6%. He was like, if you get $1,000 in your pay, before taxes, and you put 6% in, the company will give you 6%. So, like I said, I'm from a place where you had to learn, you had to be quick with it, you had to understand terms that weren't terms and stuff like that. So if you notice, back in the hood, all of the leaders weren't the 6'8", 300-pound guys. It was always the guys that were smart, especially smart with numbers and who could understand, talk quick with it. So I'm like, okay, what is this guy talking about? I'm like, so you're telling me $60, they're gonna give me $60? And he was like, yes. He said, you put this $60 in this bucket, they're gonna give you $60 and it's yours. Nobody can touch it. And I'm like, for real? And so he showed me the paperwork and he showed me online, So this 15-minute conversation went into about an hour and a half that this guy spent with me, telling me on I need to invest in 401k. Every time I get a raise, I need to put a percentage in. He said, you get a 2% raise, you put in 1%. You get a 3% raise, you put in 1%, 1.5%. You get a 4% raise, you put in 2%. He said, whenever you get a raise, you always put something in there. And I'm thinking to myself, okay. I said, how do I gain money from it? I said, because I can just put it in the savings. He said, no, They're going to buy stock. It's going to be invested and reinvested. He said, we're expecting the company to do some stock splitting. Now he's talking way over my head because I knew what I knew, but I did not know a thing about that stock and investment stuff, right? But he, him taking out that time to spend an hour and a half with me, basically with a guy that he did not know, all of these people on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, I need to take a chance with this. Basically, he was like, let payroll do the heavy lifting for your future. He said, there's other things that you may need with this. He said, you may have some kids down the line or something like that. You may want to borrow against your 401k. Well, it will have built up. Then you can borrow and pay yourself back to help you with that kid, but you're paying yourself back. You don't have to go get yourself into debt. And I'll have another video on how all of that works. But that was another one of the tips that he gave me. And I'm thinking to myself, it was like automatic investing, right, through payroll. I'm thinking to myself, wow. So I ended up getting a lot of respect for this guy. Lots of respect because, he turned me on the game, and I was like, wow. Within, and I don't know the numbers right now. I can go back and check. But let's say I put in $2,000 that year. When I look back again, and I remember just forgetting about it, just keep adding, and I looked and I said, oh, I got $2,000 in there. But when I seen that $2,000 turned to $6,000 and like that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to call the HR department or benefits department so I can see how I can get this money or what's involved with this money. And that's when I started kind of teaching myself about it.